he is indeed the most approachable, most intelligent, most lovable, kind, and amazing host. His name is Brian Kilmeade with the day off. This is your humble D.C. correspondent, Griff Jenkins, getting the privilege and honor of sitting in again. Somehow I didn't break it the first time, so Allison, Pete, and Eric seem to have brought me back, and what a day we have. You know, I'm coming live to you from the Tony Snow Radio studio in D.C. It's a show that I started and produced, and as Tony's producer, and I was able to, obviously he was a mentor and a close friend, and we miss him every single day, and I get goosebumps when they ask me to sit down at this microphone in the studio he graced, looking up on the wall at a giant Steve Penley portrait of the snowman, as we called him, as Al called him. He called me Surfer Boy. That was his nickname for me, and you know, I think of that relationship, and I think of what maybe Tony Snow would have to say about this. He's often attributed a quote that I believe he first wrote, then he would use it in speeches and whatnot, saying that his quote was, "We've got to rebuild human hearts and persuade people that hope is not just possible, but essential." And it's a very poignant quote in this moment, because he's right. We have got to, in the wake of this tragic shooting of Charlie Kirk, rebuild human hearts, particularly those out there that in some way find a reason to celebrate such a heinous and despicable act, regardless of your politics. But I digress. We'll talk more about this because we have an extremely special guest coming on right now. And as one radio producer to another, we are fortunate right now to have Andrew Kolvet, Charlie Kirk's producer, joining us. He did the great Charlie Kirk show, and he hosted that show on Friday, which I know was very difficult. And today he's at the White House, where Vice President Vance will be taking that microphone. Andrew, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Griff. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, and I know, I remember when Tony passed, I was thrust into doing a lot of interviews that were extremely difficult because of the emotional component that came with it. But you have been doing some amazing interviews. You were on Maria Bartiromo this morning. You were really talking about it. And, I ran down the hall and said, "Hey, Andrew, I want to get you on because I think we're learning things." When you were producing the show with Charlie, you talked about the fact that Charlie would take every commercial break to read messages from viewers, and that really stood out to me. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it was something that he took from Rush Limbaugh, because Rush was sort of famous for reading his listener emails. And when we started the show, Charlie actually knew Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh was quietly and privately a large donor to Turning Point. His widow, after he passed, let us, say that publicly. And Charlie loved Rush, and I was a Rush baby. Charlie was a Rush baby. Charlie used to run in his lunch breaks and listen to Rush Limbaugh at school. Which is a very nerdy and wonderful and endearing thing that he would do. So when we started the show, we started with freedom@charliekirk.com, and Charlie made the vow that he was going to read every email that a listener sent him. And I don't think he knew what he was getting himself into because of just how rapidly the show grew. And we had, 2 to 2.5 million viewers or listeners of the Charlie Kirk show every day. And so, depending on the topic, it would just get flooded. And I watched him go through each email, and he would scan it at the very least. But it was, and oftentimes he would even, start debating people that would email him, and they'd say, "You're wrong, Charlie," or "You're right." And he would get into these I had access to the email as well. And, sometimes I would see these in the sent folder I would go to. It was the kind of thing I would do most days and see who he was communicating with. And you would see these long, 5, 6, 7 email long threads with the same, listener, and they're debating back and forth in the middle of the show. And it was just the most remarkable thing, because, here I am barely able to keep up with my duties on the show and what I had to do. And Charlie's hosting it, thinking through, sharpening his arguments, and debating with people, or just saying thank you or God bless you or whatever. I mean, there was probably more of those positive ones, but it was a remarkable thing, and it made him so close and accessible to the grassroots. And that's ultimately, from a political standpoint, there's many ways you could dissect who Charlie Kirk was. But from a political standpoint, he was a grassroots warrior. He often said, I just want a Republican Party that's worthy of its voters, that's as conservative as its base, and so he saw himself as a voice for just everyday Americans all across the country that had common sense and virtue, but they didn't have power or name ID. And he knew that God had blessed him with both of those things and influence at the highest level. And so he was so close to the people that listened to his show, and he did that through emails and through other means, and obviously through visiting college campuses and being so close to young people. He knew the needs, wants, and concerns of real everyday Americans, the people that put Trump in office, better than anybody in this country, especially anybody, with such a prominent role as he had. And he just loved it. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you could look at it as just something he did as a discipline, but he just loved doing it.
He sure did. And, that was the parallel that I saw with our late friend, Tony Snow, because he loved it too. Andrew, to a degree, to a fault, to a degree, Tony Snow also, I think, shared with Charlie the fact that they saw the best in everybody, even the most egregious critics. He saw the best in them, and I, like you, I suppose I'm not necessarily a Rush kid because I was in the game. I started Ollie North's show in the 90s, but Tony Snow would frequently fill in for Rush. I'll never forget, talent on loan from God. But yet, I am shaped by the years of Rush, and the Ollie North show was 3 to 6 p.m. We came on right after. We were always sort of the conservative movement grew in the 90s and the 2000s, but yet Charlie has taken it further than Rush and further than those that were the loudest voices. And I think that's why you're seeing the outpouring. A little later in this hour, we're going to have a young student that was profoundly moved, became a TPUSA member, just one of thousands. But you were also talking about the fact that you believe, because of Charlie and what you've done as well, you are part of this, a big part of it. You're seeing one of the greatest generational realignments in modern times. Speak to me about that.
Yeah, and you said something that Charlie loved the people that he was interacting with and engaging with. Sometimes the internet being what the internet is, the clips where Charlie was being a little bit more fiery are the ones that would go viral. But that is a misrepresentation of his interaction with most people. 90% of his interactions were soft, and they were kind, and they were patient. And one of the things, especially as Charlie got older, that people recognized in his debate style is just how patient he was. I mean, there's so many comments like, I can't believe how patient Charlie is. I would have been yelling at this person, but he saw his roles. When he first started on campus, he was, in his early 20s. And so he was more like a peer arguing with a peer. But when he got to be 29, 30, 31, he realized that he was more of a big brother figure. And he tried to understand and to listen and to meet people on their level. And he and I just love that, what you said, Griff, because he loved those people and never, if they had bad ideas, that was not a disqualifier to them as human beings. He was like, I want to correct your thinking because you're worth it. And because our country's worth it. And that's something that's been weighing on my heart, just because, some of the more fiery interactions, the internet loves to spread those, or Charlie Kirk destroys woke lib or whatever, that was such a small part of actually the way Charlie interacted with people. And it was because he loved those he was interacting with.
And I think, Andrew, it wasn't a trait that Charlie had. It was a gift. Tony had that gift. Few people have that gift. And I think it's rooted clearly in their faith. And, Charlie obviously was as strong of a faith leader as he was a conservative advocate. Hey, listen, before I run out of time, producer to producer here, you got a big show to do today. You got the vice president taking the microphone. What are you going to do? What's the vice president's message? What do you see happening?
Well, I just want to say one thing. Charlie wanted revival, not revolution. His faith led everything that he did, and he was a man of integrity, even in the most private moments. We're so honored by the vice president hosting the show. It was his idea, and so, of course, we dropped everything. We flew to D.C. I'm doing this interview from the White House right now, compound at least, and it's going to be an amazing honor and a tribute to Charlie and their friendship. JD and Charlie were dear friends, and we've got a guest list that will blow most people's minds, and it's going to be an amazing time because the most prominent leaders in our country all had a personal relationship with Charlie. And when we asked who could join, it was like everybody, revolving around this administration wanted to be a part of it.
Well, I can tell you this. When I saw you on Maria this morning, I told Allison and Eric and Pete, I said, that's the guest I want more than anybody, because Andrew Kolvet certainly understands. Hey, quickly, I'll let you go in 60 seconds, Andrew, but talk to me about the memorial coming this weekend. You actually think it's going to even exceed the capacity of the seating.
Oh, yeah, without a question. We're already working on overflow. When we put out that we were holding the memorial on Sunday at Cardinal Stadium in Phoenix, people are saying, "Oh, hold 70,000." Well, no, that's when the field is taken up. It's going to hold over 100,000 people, and we've already received an overwhelming a deluge of people who want to come, and we want to make sure that as many of those as possible can be a part of that event. And the president's coming, and the vice president, and Kirk will be speaking, and so many more, and it's going to be a real tribute to the legacy. I believe the eternal legacy of Charlie Kirk, and it'll be an honor to be there.
It's going to be a beautiful tribute, and, we didn't even get into, my goodness, the power of Erica and, her comments about the fire that burns in her now as a widow. It's just remarkable. No one could have ever...
She is remarkable.
No one ever could have, given her a pass to just close the door, but she didn't. She didn't shut down. She's fighting. I've got to let you go, but final word on Erica.
She is fierce. She is one of the most accessibly real, honest humans I've ever been around. She is strong, and she is real, and just a phenomenal woman. And she is, without a doubt, she is the focal point, the spiritual center of TPUSA moving forward. There's no doubt.
Indeed, and we look forward to that. You've got a great radio show coming up. Great job, and I'll leave you with this, Andrew. I know you already know this, but just so you hear it, Charlie would be awfully proud of what you're doing. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
The realest of the real, the Brian Kilmeade Show. Brian Kilmeade out today. Griff Jenkins, your D.C. humble correspondent, trying to fill his giant shoes here and talking today as we all sort of try and process the passing of Charlie Kirk and wonder what this means for the country and where things go. And one thing that certainly would appear quite clear if you heard the widow of Charlie Kirk, Erica Kirk's words on Friday, that this Turning Point USA movement is only going to grow stronger. And so I wanted to take a moment to bring in a very, very special guest, because we have heard the beautiful tributes, and will continue to do so, of those that knew Charlie so well. But as we were hearing a little earlier from Charlie Kirk's producer, Andrew Kolvet, that there are already, just in the wake of Charlie's passing, some 37,000 requests to start chapters with TPUSA, to create and get involved in a movement that already has over 900 chapters across the country. And I am very fortunate to have watched a young, beautiful, intelligent, amazing woman grow up from high school. This is Sarah Elhilow. She is one of my daughter Madeline's best friends. I watched them grow up in high school, and they went to college together. And during this period, particularly at college, Sarah actually got involved, joined it, and became part of this movement that everyone's talking about. And Sarah, thank you for joining us and coming on. And I know you obviously are devastated by this news, but I thought it would be helpful for viewers and listeners to sort of understand why this movement touched so many young people in what Andrew Kolvet was calling a generational realignment towards conservative values, towards faith. Sarah, thanks for joining us.
Hi. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I started getting involved with Turning Point my sophomore year of college. And the first thing that I ever went to at Turning Point was Georgia was hosting Rob Smith, who advertised himself as the Black gay veteran. And I thought that really caught my attention. I was already conservative at the time. But it was around the time of the 2020 election, from what I remember. And so things were pretty heated. And I went with my roommate in college, and we absolutely loved it. We started going to weekly meetings afterwards, and I actually interned for Turning Point my fall semester of my junior year and continued going to the weekly meetings. I went to a couple of their conferences, one in West Palm and one in Dallas, Texas. And it just felt like such a sanctuary on campus to be part of a bigger community that thinks like myself. And I really liked it. But at the same time, it also really pushed me outside my comfort zone. Part of my job with Turning Point was to table on campus, where we set up a big table where there was a lot of footwork on campus, or people walking by on campus. And we had the big signs, the Turning Point slogans, like "Big Government Sucks." So it caught everybody's attention. And I was engaging with people who, having these conversations with people who really disagreed with me. And I thought, that was really pivotal. And that was something that Charlie Kirk really fought for, was to have these open lines of communications between parties and people with different beliefs. And I just really admired what he stood for. It really clicked with me. And I just loved my experience with it.
Did you ever get to meet Charlie?
I didn't, but I did see him speak, I think, twice at both of those conferences.
And hearing, about your experiences and I applaud Sarah. Not only do I love you because I feel like, I've watched you grow up, but you found within your association with Turning Point this confidence to find your voice. And, do you feel like that did help you find your voice, and that we're seeing this movement, Charlie, start across the country, countless other young people like yourself find their voices?
I do think it helped me find my voice. This election was a tough one. It was very heated, very contentious. And I've had people tell me to be silent and not tell people that I voted, who I voted for. And I disagree with that. It's not what Charlie Kirk would have wanted. I always tell people, if they're going to ask me who I vote for, I'll be honest. And I will have a conversation with you about why I voted, my voting choice, because that's what he would have wanted. That's the biggest thing I took away from Charlie Kirk, is that he was always willing to have a conversation with people who disagreed with him. That was what he wanted. And it's so important in our democracy. I think that he embodied values that every conservative and every person in our country who's engaging in our political system should strive to embody. He was respectful, articulate, truthful, and just so well-intentioned. And so,
Sarah, you obviously had that table set up. You were engaging. How important do you think it is that we do have the peaceful exchange of ideas and discussion and conversation on these campuses?
I think it's really important. I don't think it gets enough attention how divided our country is right now, and the right way to fix it is not by silencing yourself. It's by talking respectfully and having these open lines of communication. So I do think it's really important, and I hope that Turning Point comes to more college campuses, because it was such a great idea to set up a table. And I mean, people of all political beliefs would come up to talk to me, and it was always a nice conversation. I can't actually remember any bad experiences. I definitely got some bad looks, but
I imagine you did. That's the environment we live in. And, your generation, unlike mine, and ones before you, really didn't have the vitriol that you have on social media. You're the first generation that really had to process and deal with it. And obviously, social media brings out the worst of people in that environment, and it sort of has spilled over some into real life. And Charlie, and Governor Cox was talking about sometimes it's important just to tune out, turn off, engage in family time, faith, do something other than doom scrolling. Do you feel like that's a lesson that'll come out of this, particularly for younger people?
I hope so, and that's actually one of the things that's frustrating me most about this whole past week is all the negative commentary in my social media feed, and a lot of it was based on incomplete clips of Charlie Kirk that were really lifted out of context. And it's just really frustrating. A lot of people, especially my generation, get their research and news from social media, and they don't go back and watch the entire video from which that snippet was taken from. And they think it's true. They're reading it at face value. They're judging his entire life's worth and mission based on a 10 or 20-second clip. It's really disheartening to me, and it's not what Charlie Kirk would have wanted. He always led with facts and statistics and did his research, and that's something that I really hope people follow in his footsteps and stop hitting posts so blindly.
Well, I'll tell you this. It's pretty darn clear, Sarah, that Charlie's widow, Erica Kirk, is not going to be dismayed in the slightest by the criticism that her late husband's getting. And, this is a woman for whom the world would never have blamed for shutting the door, turning out the lights, and collapsing in grief. Instead, she found remarkable composure and delivered poignant words of defiance on Friday. I just want to play a little bit of that, and we'll get your thoughts on Erica Kirk. Cut 16, guys.
The evildoers responsible for my husband's assassination have no idea what they have done. They killed Charlie because he preached a message of patriotism, faith, and of God's merciful love. They should all know this. If you thought that my husband's mission was powerful before, you have no idea. You have no idea what you just have unleashed across this entire country and this world. You have no idea. You have no idea the fire that you have ignited within this wife. The cries of this widow will echo around the world like a battle cry.
Powerful words, Sarah. Powerful. And it certainly seems that, she is determined that the mission her husband started will continue. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, very powerful words. She did great on Friday night, and I hope that everything that she says is true. I hope that the Turning Point movement doesn't die on campuses. I do think it's going to get stronger, like you said. There's been a huge uptick in Turning Point job applications and charters to set up at different colleges and high schools. So I hope that it grows and it gets stronger, and it opens people's eyes to how much work this country needs to do with engaging in a respectful debate.
And so will, you continue to follow Turning Point? Are you still working with it? Like, what is, for a young person, what is the situation now with being involved?
I am not. I graduated from University of Georgia in 2023, right. And I'm still continuing my education with law school now. And but I still follow them on social media. I enjoyed watching his videos, and I think I still follow Turning Point at University of Georgia. I like keeping up with it, but unfortunately, I don't think law schools have chapters.
No, they don't. And I'm so proud of you. You, like my daughter, pursuing a legal degree. But, let me take just a moment and thank you for joining us and sharing this perspective, because I don't think people really understand, or have heard from people like yourself who actually lived the mission of Charlie Kirk and what he's trying to do. But I do want you to take a moment, Sarah, to speak directly to, a young high school kid or a college student right now listening to you, listening to your experience and how it impacted you in a positive way. What do you say to that young high schooler coming up that may be feeling that their voice isn't represented, that they feel, intimidated to speak out about their faith or their values that they hold?
I think Turning Point will give you a community, and it'll teach you to be confident in what you believe in. In high school, I don't know if I ever would have talked to somebody. I mean, I would have talked to somebody with differing beliefs, but I wouldn't have been so confident to do so, and realize the importance of it. I say definitely get involved. You'll find the community in Turning Point, and it'll also push you outside your comfort zone like it did for me. I have nothing bad to say about it. I loved my experience in it, and I hope that more people get involved, especially at a young age.
Well, it's a remarkable thing, and I appreciate you coming on, and I'll just give you the last few seconds here. When you sort of heard the news, you were devastated, and now we've all been sort of processing it. What are your final thoughts about Charlie and what we've witnessed?
I think it was a terrible tragedy. It was an act of political violence. It was an attack on our First Amendment, our freedom of speech. He was doing something that he was extremely passionate about and beyond well-intentioned. Like I said, he was respectful, articulate, truthful. And I hope that more people can learn from him on both sides, on all sides of the political spectrum, and act with kindness, dignity, and truthfulness, because it's just so important in this day and age. And so...
It is so important. It is so important. And it is on those college campuses. That was the genius of Charlie. Not only did he have the gift to engage and take it directly to the college campuses where there is so much of a one-sided, often opinion, and it's not in the conservative bent, but he wanted to be there in person to engage and create that dialogue through words. He was shot holding a microphone using his words, the very thing that our nation was founded on, the very thing that was so important and important to the movement, which is clearly only going to grow. Sarah Elhilow, thank you for taking time and sharing that with us. It's a remarkable insight and very kind words. And hopefully some young people have been listening to you talk and in your ability to sort of find your voice through this. And good luck with that legal degree. I know you're doing well, and that's because you are an intelligent, brilliant, smart young woman. Sarah Elhilow, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, so Tom, let's drill in. I figured I'm so excited that we could bring you on today, because I think while there are so many things to consider and process, one of them that really stands out is whether or not, these cell phones, whether the digital world played a role in, is what's being described, characterized possibly as radicalizing this otherwise previously sort of normal Utah middle class kid growing up. And, the governor, Spencer Cox, talked a little bit over the weekend about this and the digital connection. I want you to listen to this soundbite, get your reaction. Cut 3, guys.
Went to my alma mater, Utah State University, but was only there for a very short amount of time. I dropped out after less than one semester, and it seemed to happen kind of after that. After he had moved back to the southern part of Utah. Clearly, there was a lot of gaming going on. Friends that have confirmed that there was kind of that deep dark internet, the Reddit culture, and these other dark places of the internet where this person was going deep. And you saw that on the casings. I think I didn't have any idea what those inscriptions, many of those inscriptions even meant, but they are certainly the memification that is happening in our society today.
Tom, what do you make of all this? You see a digital connection?
Well, no doubt about it. I mean, I refer to these devices as the modern day weapons of mass destruction. Yes, I wrote a book. The first edition of my book, Disconnected, came out in 2016. Second edition, 2020. My most recent book is called Raising Healthy Teenagers. So I've been lecturing to parents, schools, organizations since 2009 about the mental health impact that these devices are having on our nation's youth. And in my recent book, what I started seeing post-COVID is a lot more oppositional defiant behavior. Let me explain what that is, Griff. So it's called ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. And what that is younger kids, they could be 11, 12, 13, that are absolutely defiant and oppositional to an authority figure, usually the parent. And I'm talking getting physical with mom and dad, spitting at them. And all of it is consistent with the messaging that they're receiving. Kids today spend 8 or 9 hours a day. The majority of their waking hours immersed in this deep, dark place. And it's definitely going to shape their thoughts and definitely shape their emotions. And you take, this Tyler Robinson, we know that he was in a deep, dark web, got sucked into that. His brain normalized that. No question about that. I firmly believe that. And you throw on top of it, I believe he has a roommate or something that's a transgender person, right? And Charlie Hurt, he was going to say he's anti this. He said he wasn't really anti anything. He was just trying to get people to think. But the people on that side automatically think that if you don't try to normalize something and celebrate it, then you're anti it. So I think this sort of created the perfect time bomb and the perfect storm, just like all the other things we're seeing now.
It's frightening, Tom, to think about, honestly, because you wonder, if this happened with this individual, it could happen in any household. I will say I'm the father of 2 daughters that are now 24 and 19. They went through that right when you're writing this book. And unfortunately, knock on wood, I haven't seen really negative effects of them in this oppositional defiant behavior, but I did see what is and continues to be a unhealthy addiction to it. And so when you talk about this young guy that gets sort of radicalized, is you put it exactly right. He was normalized. And we know from going, and these kids can get to darker places than you and I normally do because we aren't the generation that grew up with these things. And so when they get there, it holds the worst of our angels, the worst version of ourself is screaming at 11 out of 10 level the horrific things out there. We had a guest on Andrew Kolvet, who is Charlie Kirk's radio producer, had him on the show today, and he was talking about how he hated that the portrayal of Charlie only was the 10 seconds of someone on these very websites in these dark places clipped and took him out of context, and that 90% of his interactions were purposeful and kind and trying to engage in the differences. And you're right. So I think, it's worth at this moment to have someone of your knowledge and expertise. What do parents, and not necessarily ones like me whose kids are just a little bit out of the teens, but the ones that are, on that 10, 11, 12, about to basically go off that digital cliff, and parents are going to learn, whether we're being honest or not, parents are going to learn even the best intentions are lost and failed in trying to get the young people to separate from the digital dependency.
Yeah. So when I'm doing these lectures, Griff, I'll give you an example. So I'll get to a point in my lecture, and if I'm speaking to a parent group, let's say there's like 300 people, I'll say, raise your hand if you think it's smart for an 11-year-old to have a smartphone. So never in the countless lectures that I've done has a parent ever raised their hand. Then I go on to say, all right, so we could all agree it's a bad idea for an 11-year-old to have a smartphone. Yeah. Then I drop the bomb on them. And I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot. And I say, well, The average age of first smartphone issuance is 10.3 years old. So even though all of us in this room agree it's a terrible idea, the majority of us in this room, our children at that age have them. So why is that? It's called social conformity. And that's how human beings operate. Like just like the school of fish or the birds that all move at the same time. We tend to do that as well. It's not always a bad thing. So what I talk about, I created something in Disconnected, a new, healthier social conformity, and I call it the phone-free school pledge. And what that is, it's pretty simple. So we got to start somewhere. So imagine you're a parent of a child going into kindergarten or first grade. Your child doesn't have a phone then, the majority, okay? And then you get that packet, from the school with all the forms you need to fill out, and right in there is a form that says, I agree not to purchase a smartphone for my child until late adolescence. I'm betting, and I've had schools that are already doing this, that any parent that sees that of a child that age is going to look at that and be like, yeah, duh, of course. And then hopefully talk to other people in the school, other parents, and then everybody kind of comes on board with that. And then we create a new, healthier, social conformity where imagine our children going right into middle school and possibly high school and not having smartphones. And we've created that sort of collective consciousness now at a grassroots level, school to school. This is the way out of it. It's got to start somewhere. But like I said, that's how we are. We just tend to, kind of cross our fingers as parents and roll the dice and say, I hope it doesn't happen to my kid.
Yeah, it's such a great point, Tom. And you're right. I mean, listen, as parents too, the pressure for the social conformity is really unsurmountable. And, parents can make convenient excuses for themselves. Like, well, at the end of the day, I want to make sure that my child has a phone in case there's an emergency. But, somehow for centuries, parents got along and their children were okay without these things. And, I just worry where it all goes. In fact, let's bring this up a little bit. I don't know if you have thoughts, and it's kind of developing this morning, but it appears there may be some sort of deal for TikTok. And, I remember covering Republicans when they were vehemently against TikTok, not just because of the Chinese connection in the Chinese controlling this algorithm, but obviously because of the algorithms themselves. And to the very point that you raise, which is, with these algorithms on places like TikTok and elsewhere, they know that the reaction is greater when it's rage. There's cute kittens, bunnies bouncing on a trampoline, and the makers of these algorithms see, oh, that's nice. It's getting a little engagement, a little activity. But then when it's rage, it really drives people. And so, I don't know how I feel about this TikTok, which is, it looks like there could be a deal. It looks like, the president has leaned into TikTok. It obviously helped him in the election.
Yeah, I saw a headline about that. I think this is his third go round or whatever, sort of a threat. And I think he said by September 17th, something's got to happen. And you got to remember too, China, that's where it comes from. The content that people see in China is much different than what they see here, right? So these kids, to your point, the algorithms are super fast. There was a story 2 years ago. This is fascinating, very relatable. 3 years ago, where there were hundreds of teenage girls in the United States that developed motor tics, like somebody that has Tourette's syndrome. And they went to their doctors, and the doctors had never seen this before. And then none of them had Tourette's. So doctors collaborated in the United States and Europe to figure out what the cause was. And the cause was that each of these girls were consuming countless hours of TikTok videos of people with Tourette's syndrome. It was trending. So think about the brain and how malleable this mind is. Just from watching that, all this over and over again, the brain is sending physiological signals to the body, creating involuntary tics. Now imagine consuming nothing but violence and anger all day long. Think about what that's doing.
It's a remarkable point, and I did not know about that study. That's fascinating. And broadening it a little bit, opening the lens, I do worry about how children's brains are affected by emulating what their parents do with social media, with our phones. Do you see any connection there, concern?
Tremendous connection. So I just mentioned the 8 or 9 hours a day that kids are spending on their devices. We adults are spending the same amount, maybe a little bit more. And here's the issue. All right. So the number one predictor of a child's mental health outcomes is the relationship that he or she has with their parents. Right. So now imagine a household. All right. You look up the definition of family in the encyclopedia and it looks like the Brady Bunch. But now a family of four is more like four individuals that live under the same roof and don't really talk. Johnny's in the basement playing his video games. Susie's upstairs in her bedroom on her phone, and mom and dad are doing their own thing. So yes, we have to lead by example, and that means collecting our children, yanking them out of this bedroom. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I have kids the same age.
Yeah.
Spending
Oh,
their time.
you bet.
Yeah, bedroom starts with bed. That's where you're supposed to sleep. We got to reinvent the family room, right? because there is no relation. That's not a relationship. If you have four people that don't really communicate and live under the same roof, there's got to be dialogue. There's got to be dinner, sitting around the dinner table. There's got to be communication, right? There's got to be lessons. Even the car rides to and from school. If you have a 5 or 10 minute ride, I see it every time. The head down in the passenger seat, no dialogue between parent and child. That's fertile ground. 180 days a year, 5 or 10 minutes a day. Huge connection and communication opportunity right there between parent and child. So we got to get back to those basics.
We do have to get back to that. I am so glad that you raised that, Tom, and I hope that any of our listeners across the nation are picking that up, because it's tough. We can all look at ourselves in the mirror and say, man, I let our house be divided by everybody doing their own thing. And, the first one that says that's not the case, I'd love to sit down with them, because it's just the normal lifestyle we've sort of developed in this country, and it's not healthy. And I'll tell you, I really did applaud. I didn't know this about Charlie Kirk until after his passing, but over the weekend, looking at so much stuff, I'd seen where he tried to take Fridays off and disconnect from his phone for his family and spend time in prayer and in family dinner, whatever it is. But then he talked about how it actually helped his brain, so that he could go back to doing the hard work that he did, but having that digital disconnect on Friday nights, this time for his brain to reset, was really important. And this is as an adult, a young father and a husband and an adult, maybe some lessons there. Tom Kersting, as always, it is such a pleasure to have your great insight on the Brian Kilmeade Show. Thank you, my friend. It's going to be a crazy week, I think.
Yeah, Griff, thanks, man. Appreciate it.